crime at the home of John and Patsy Ramsey.
Who killed John Ramsey?
The evidence is so subject to interpretation, it can be spun any way you want.
We have your daughter in our possession.
Here is a little girl who was murdered at Christmas time.
John Ramsey ushered Burke out of the house while it was still a kidnapping.
Burke was instantly shielded by his parents.
The cops certainly wanted the Ramseys charged.
This cloud of suspicion went over the family. We began to wonder if there were terrible secrets going on in that house.
An intruder may have killed the little girl.
God knows who you are, and we will find you.
The grand jury believed these parents had some role in what went on in that house that night.
This could be the crime of the century. We are so engaged in this case 20 years later because of the audacity of the crime. The Ramseys are the people that many people aspire to be, but it was a family that was not perfect. They had their illnesses, they had their tragedies, and they had their secrets.
JonBenet Ramsey is, in many ways, your typical all-American little girl. Blonde-haired, blue-eyed, loves toys and games, her puppy, her brother, her family.
JonBenet Ramsey's story begins and ends with family. The 6-year-old girl was at the very start of what should have been a storybook kind of life. She was nurtured and surrounded by the family that loved her and her big brother, Burke.
Her parents, John and Patsy Ramsey, are paragons of Boulder's high society. Incredibly wealthy, incredibly successful. They were a couple that everyone would aspire to be.
They lived in a gorgeous home in a well-to-do area of Boulder, 6,800 square feet house, huge.
It's essentially a paradise for raising a family.
They were great churchgoers, great community people. They are basically, from the outside, the ideal family.
Patsy Ramsey is somebody who really dotes on her 2 children. They are the center of her universe.
The Ramsey family looked like they were living the American dream.
There's another side to JonBenet that makes her somewhat exceptional. JonBenet is a natural performer. Almost as soon as she could walk, she could dance. She started singing at a very early age. She seems to find great joy in performing.
When people think about JonBenet, they remember this gorgeous little girl with long blonde hair and really penetrating blue eyes, and how she would sing and dance, singing a little off-key, but in that childish, beautiful voice. Basically, what she was just a kid. She was just 6 years old. Patsy Ramsey had been a Miss West Virginia in 1977.
So Patsy encouraged JonBenet to enroll in more and more pageants.
When I spoke with John Ramsey, John said that Patsy and JonBenet, this was their means of connection together. This is what they did as a mom and a daughter.
At age 4, JonBenet enters her first beauty pageant with her mother cheering her on all the way.
JonBenet had won Little Miss Colorado, and she picked up other pageants as well.
It's clear that she's a natural in the pageant world and somebody who is going on to quite a bit of success there.
They did not seem like the type of family that anything bad ever happens to.
On the morning of December 26, 1996, Patsy Ramsey woke up fairly early to make coffee and get her family ready to fly to visit relatives.
Patsy said that she walked down the stairs. She was halfway down and she noticed this paper on the stairs.
When she read it, she immediately became terrified.
It's a ransom note. Someone has taken JonBenet.
She went running up the stairs to look in John Bonet's room and screamed for John.
The note told her, don't call the police or your daughter will die. But Patsy called 911.
911 emergency. We have a kidnapping. Hurry, please explain to me what's going on, okay?
I asked John, I said, John, didn't you worry that if you were going to the police now that something might happen to her? And he said, no. He said, all I could think about at that moment is that my daughter was missing and that we had to find her. Within 6 minutes, the detective arrived. Patsy had also called family friends, and they had arrived.
A detective looks at the ransom note and immediately calls for backup.
Kidnapping and a ransom note? It's about as far from typical as a 911 call can get. But despite the detective's request for help, it takes them hours to arrive.
It was the day after Christmas. So the Boulder police were short-staffed. They were dealing with a crime for which none of the officers or detectives had any experience with. Kidnaps for ransom in Boulder. This is a rare event.
The Boulder Police Department contacted the FBI to notify us that there had been a kidnapping with the ransom, and they requested our assistance. I saddled up and went up to Boulder.
Patsy is completely inconsolable. She is in the sunroom of the home, surrounded by her friends who are just trying to keep her calm. She seems distraught beyond belief.
John was more stoic. He was trying to be strong, and it was he, and only he, that started making arrangements to obtain the $118,000 requested in the infamous ransom note. So he had the presence of mind to start making preparations.
John Ramsey had a family friend take his son Burke out of the house.
While John is scrambling to put together the money demanded in the ransom note, Patsy is waiting by the phone.
Kidnappers have said that they would make a phone call between 8 and 10 a.m.
For sure, John and Patsy would be on pins and needles, waiting on a call to come in.
The clock ticks down. 9 a.m. No call. 9:30. Still nothing.
10 o'clock comes. There's no call from the kidnappers.
Meanwhile, police allow John Ramsey and Fleet White, his best friend, to search the house on their own, and ultimately heading down to the basement to continue searching.
Just a few hours into the investigation, and the detective on site somehow loses control of the crime scene and John Ramsey.
The detective is calling for help, saying, I've lost track of John Ramsey. Things kind of spiraled out of control at that point.
Around 1 p.m., there comes a blood-curdling scream from the basement. And soon, John Ramsey is running up the stairs with a bundle in his arms.
John ran in and said, oh my God, it's my daughter. And they carried her upstairs, and Fleet was screaming and saying, we found her, we found her.
She was found wrapped in her favorite blanket.
She had duct tape on her mouth, her hands tied over her head.
She had a garrote wrapped around her neck. The garrote is cord attached to a handle used to strangle the victim from behind.
It was clear that she had been strangled to death.
John placed John Bonet's body on the floor and began to embrace her. Soon, Patsy, who was completely hysterical, started to do the same, hugging her little girl, weeping over her little girl.
Then the detective picked the child up and placed her near the Christmas tree, which is a really sad juxtaposition. We have this dead child below a Christmas tree that's supposed to signify hearth and family. Once the child's body was discovered, then and only then did the Boulder police spring into action. They seized a lot of very important physical evidence.
They took the 2.5-page ransom note. They also found the pad that was written on in the Ramsey's own drawer.
Now you're looking for transfer evidence throughout the entire house.
Crime scene investigators focus largely on the basement, and what they find there is a broken window and a large suitcase that has been placed beneath it.
Anyone who was there that day, all of them were treated as potential suspects.
Well, you know, you can't rule out anything at this point in the investigation.
You would only hope that when a young girl is murdered in her own home, her killer will be brought to justice.
It's the day after Christmas, 1996, and the Boulder Police Department are investigating the murder of 6-year-old JonBenet Ramsey.
You may be eluding the authorities for a time, but God knows who you are, and we will find you.
If there is ever a mess-up of a crime scene, the JonBenet Ramsey case is classic.
The problem with this particular crime scene is that everyone had traipsed all over the home and had contaminated the scene before the body had ever been found.
From the very beginning, the police were not treating this home like a crime scene.
You want to interview everyone at the scene immediately, and that means everybody.
Boulder police allowed the ransom note to be moved several times. By letting it be handled by so many different people, any DNA or fingerprints that might have been lifted off the note was essentially destroyed. The fact that JonBenet's body was moved multiple times destroyed any evidence that could have definitively pointed to her killer.
Part of the problem with the police response was understaffing. It was the day after Christmas. That's a viable reason, but you can't deny the fact that the police response was deficient, that it was substandard, and that it mattered. We may very well have had this case solved had the Boulder police secured what is a crime scene.
The coroner's office shows up much later in the day. The autopsy was done a day or two later.
The autopsy revealed a piece of undigested pineapple in the small intestine. It had to have been consumed, most likely, after she got home. The autopsy also revealed ligature strangulation. Also, a fracture of the skull, 8.5 inches long.
The medical examiner also finds evidence of sexual trauma. This girl was subjected to some sort of damage in the vaginal area that predates her death.
You put that all together, and you see that somebody has engaged in some kind of perverted sexual game with this little girl. This is a game that had been played before that went awry, totally unpredictably and tragically.
That brings an entirely different perspective to the nature of this murder.
The autopsy report itself is controversial. Which came first, the asphyxiation with the garrote or the skull fracture?
The manner in which JonBenet was strangled points to a level of expertise that would seemingly rule out an act of passion or something that was done in haste.
Whoever killed JonBenet Ramsey had to be pretty sophisticated in the use of the garrote to create this improvised, fatal weapon of death.
As the evidence keeps piling up, there's something about the crime scene that doesn't feel right to investigators.
There are those people that think that this might have been a setup to make it look like a torture scene.
It's possible that the strangulation was performed in effect to cover up a horrible head injury that had already happened.
The looping of the cord around her right wrist, I think, was staging. There were no marks at all on her wrist that indicates that she was bound. It looks that the duct tape was probably put on her face after she stopped moving. There is no evidence of struggling on the sticky side of the duct tape.
The reality is that we really don't know, but it hardly matters. This is a child who was strangled and beaten over the head in an incredibly violent and horrendous fashion.
The horrific story of the murdered little pageant star hits the media like a storm. Right away, the case seems to strike a nerve. Opinions form hard and fast about the crime and Jean Benet's parents.
Once footage of Jean Benet's pageant activities becomes public and people see her with a full face of makeup, huge hair, short dresses, strutting up and down a stage, the firestorm of criticism on John and Patsy intensified. Everyone is horrified by this little girl seemingly being forced to act mature beyond her years.
In the audience's mind, there was a link to what happened to Jean Benet and the way she behaved in the beauty pageants. Seeing this little girl making these provocative poses was very, very intriguing and very, very disturbing.
What impact does this have on the child? You have to take into consideration the fact that there was evidence of chronic abuse that predates the child's death. Someone had access to her, and someone did something to her. Is it possible that she has become sexualized and has now been a sex object for one of the other family members? Someone had access to her, and someone did something to her. Is it possible that she has become sexualized and has now been a sex object for one of the other family members?
With allegations of sexual abuse surfacing from the autopsy report, all eyes are on John and Patsy Ramsey.
There have been innuendos that she has been or was sexually molested. I can tell you those were the most hurtful innuendos to us as a family. They are totally false.
A theory bubbles up from this stew of autopsy evidence, innuendo, and those pageant videos. Some investigators believe Jean Benet was murdered to hide a very dark family secret.
There was a widespread assumption that Jean Benet was either killed in a sexual attack by accident or killed in order to keep her quiet.
This is a perverted sex game, and the death was most likely due to that.
This was the darkest theory, but it was a very tenacious theory in people's heads.
The Ramseys do have their pediatrician step forward. He says very clearly that there was never any evidence of sexual assault to Jean Benet at any point before the murder.
John felt within the first week that they were looking at them exclusively. That infuriated John and Patsy and made them more defensive with the police. It was one of the reasons that they didn't really want to cooperate. The Ramseys began pointing fingers at people that they were intimately involved with, including one of their best friends, Fleet White, who had actually been with John Ramsey when they found Jean Benet in the house and had been with the family the night that Jean Benet may have been murdered. Fleet White and the Ramseys had a bit of a falling out. Fleet was questioning a lot of things. He would question why they did the CNN interview. The falling out just kept getting deeper and deeper and deeper. And to the point where Fleet White would eventually ask one of our former governors to investigate the Ramseys. It was strange at the beginning because it was Fleet White who actually took Burke from the house and took him back to his house before they'd even found Jean Benet's body. And that's how far the accusations went.
Within 36 hours of the murder, the Ramseys contact the best criminal defense law firm in Colorado, if not the entire western United States. A couple of days after that, the Ramseys hire a publicist.
That was a real red flag.
The first place you always look is the family. 7 out of 10 murders of children, when they are killed at home, they're killed by a family member.
At this point, the police are keeping a very close eye on Patsy's behavior and John's behavior.
When I first met the Ramseys, Patsy was looking out at the room through the fingers of her hand like this. And then I said, well, I'm with the FBI. She starts sobbing a little bit. You know, I thought that whole thing was contrived. I would expect the mother of a dead child to jump up and say, my God, finally the FBI's here. Do something. None of that. It's just kind of an emotional vacuum there.
This cloud of suspicion went over the family, and we began to wonder if there were terrible secrets going on in that house.
There are murders of children that happen every day that don't get this kind of media coverage. But they don't happen to people whose family members were Miss America contestants and where the child is a beauty pageantry contestant herself.
It's been less than a week since 6-year-old JonBenet Ramsey was murdered in her own home.
The investigation is still ongoing. The investigation is still wide open.
Please leave your name, telephone number, and the nature of your information.
Rumors and theories about who killed the little girl continue to spread.
There's very intrusive scrutiny on the Ramsey family.
On New Year's Day, 1997, the day after JonBenet's funeral, John and Patsy Ramsey addressed the public.
They were advised, they say, to tell their story.
We were absolutely nauseated by that we would even be considered suspects in the death of our daughter, and felt that an interrogation of us was a waste of our time and a waste of the police's time.
Going on national media before they'd even talked to the police, that made the police very suspicious.
The Ramseys had hired a lawyer, and it was the lawyer calling the shots.
There's no law that says people have to cooperate. If the Ramseys don't want to talk to police, they don't have to at all. That's correct.
No self-respecting criminal defense attorney is going to subject his or her client to interrogation in a murder case, knowing the client is the prime suspect.
Police had asked time after time if they could have an interview.
After talking with the media for months, in April 1997, John and Patsy finally agreed to an interview with the Boulder police.
They were with their attorneys. It was a contentious interview.
The police's goal was to lock them in on a timeline. There were significant inconsistencies.
Patsy had said to investigators that JonBenet had gone straight to bed after coming home from a holiday party, that she had not stopped and had any snacks, that there had been nothing further to eat.
And yet we know that there was pineapple in JonBenet Ramsey's gut.
Pineapple had not been served at any of the homes that the Ramseys had visited on Christmas Day.
But when police searched the home, they did find a bowl in the kitchen that had pineapple residue in it.
And we know that Patsy Ramsey's fingerprints are on the spoon and the bowl where the pineapple came from.
A child's bedtime snack. It seems like a small point, but it's the first crack in the Ramsey story. Investigators dig even deeper, looking for other inconsistencies or even lies.
911 emergency. Find on them now. We have a kidnapping.
The recording of Patsy Ramsey's call to 911 was made public.
There's a note left and our daughter's gone. A note was left in your daughter's? Yeah. How old is your daughter? 6 years old. She's gone. 6 years old. Okay, what's your name? Are you Patsy Ramsey? I'm the mother. Oh my God. Please.
In that call, many experts say they can hear the couple's son, Burke, in the background saying, "What did you find?"
Take a deep breath. Please. Okay. Hurry. Patsy. Take a deep breath. Please. Okay. Hurry. Patsy.
In addition to the 911 call, investigators pressed the Ramseys on Burke's whereabouts the day JonBenet was murdered.
John Ramsey ushered Burke out of the house while it was still a kidnapping.
The question is, why?
What John should have done if he wanted the boy out of the house is ask the Boulder police to take him to the police department. That's the safest place for that boy to be, and that didn't happen.
Whatever Burke knows, whatever he saw inside that house, remains hidden.
Burke was never able to come forward as a key witness to what may have happened to his sister that night because he was instantly shielded by his parents.
I don't think that the police felt that this was a completely honest interview. Having done the interviews that many months after the actual event, the Ramseys had been prepared and they had been briefed on what might be the correct thing for them to say.
During a press conference, Boulder Police Department came out clearly and said,
we have an umbrella of suspicion, and people have come and gone under that umbrella. They do remain under an umbrella of suspicion, but we're not ready to name any suspects.
To me, that was synonymous with the Ramseys are persons of interest.
The JonBenet Ramsey case is the only case that the FBI is aware of in which a ransom note was left at the scene where the body was also found. The only case ever.
It seems incomprehensible that someone would attempt to exact a ransom knowing that the body of the child had been left behind in the home.
The first thing that really was a red flag to me was the length of the ransom note. 2.5 pages long. This looks like the Magna Carta or the War and Peace.
Mr. Ramsey, listen carefully.
We are a group of individuals that represent a small foreign faction.
At this time, we have your daughter in our possession. She is safe and unharmed.
And if you want her to see 1997, you must follow our instructions to the letter.
You will withdraw $118,000 from your account.
I will call you between 8 and 10 a.m. tomorrow.
Speaking to anyone about your situation, such as police, FBI, etc., will result in your daughter being beheaded.
You can try to deceive us, but be warned that we are familiar with law enforcement countermeasures.
Don't try to grow a brain, John. Use that good Southern common sense of yours.
The pad of paper on which the demand note was read, the Sharpie pen that was used to write the note, it all came from the house.
When investigators analyzed the pad, they saw the imprint of what could have been practice notes.
And a ransom note is loaded with things that only the family might know. $118,000 was the exact amount of John Ramsey's Christmas bonus.
Repeated references to this child going to be murdered if the Ramseys notify anyone. Yet what does Patsy Ramsey do that morning? She calls 911.
Everything about the ransom note and even the murder itself indicated that this murder was committed by someone who knew this family very, very well.
The ransom note was signed Victory, SBTC. Theorists have had a field day with what SBTC means.
One theory has it that it's the Subic Bay Training Center, which is the naval base where John Ramsey had trained when he was in the Navy.
The investigators found a plaque in the basement where JonBenet was. It had Subic Bay Training Center on it, so it obviously was in view when whoever wrote the note was there.
To people who think it's an inside job, the ransom note is Exhibit A. They look at this as evidence of staging. The theory being that John Ramsey and his wife, Patsy, staged the scene to look like a kidnapping.
Multiple rounds of handwriting analysis were performed.
Patsy Ramsey was not eliminated from having written the ransom note. And to the Patsy is guilty theorists, that's a gold mine.
The problem is, you can't build a whole case around handwriting. That's not enough for me to charge that person with any crime.
The public perception was that the Ramseys were prime suspects number 1 and 2, but in reality, the Boulder Police did undertake an exhaustive investigation of a number of people. Every valid lead that was out there, they followed up on.
The Boulder Police Department interviewed over 600 people. They talked to over 60 experts in all sorts of fields. There were a lot of suspects that were looked at.
There was an open window in the house, and there was a suitcase at the bottom of the window.
A detective on the scene asked John Ramsey if the home had been secured the night before. And at that point, John Ramsey admitted that he hadn't actually activated the home's alarm system. One of the key suspects in the intruder theory of JonBenét's death is actually Santa Claus. A man named Bill McReynolds had played Santa at holiday parties and was a close friend of the Ramsey family.
We have a murder that's committed on Christmas. What could be more fitting and awful than having Santa Claus be guilty? The 6-year-old daughter of the Ramseys has been murdered in their own house on Christmas night. And now Santa Claus is the prime suspect.
67-year-old Bill McReynolds, the neighborhood Santa at holiday parties, promised JonBenet a special Christmas gift. But could this promise have lured her into the basement?
He knew JonBenet. He knew the layout of the house.
As a suspect, Bill grows even more suspicious.
His 9-year-old daughter, on December 26, 1974, had been kidnapped with a friend, and the poor little girl had been forced to watch her friend be sexually assaulted.
It happened on December 26th, 22 years to the day before JonBenét's body was discovered in the basement of the Ramsey family home.
In 1976, McReynolds' wife wrote a play where a young girl is molested, tortured, and then killed in a basement.
She later defended the play as being a sort of purging of her emotions about the event, but it seemed like a fairly eerie thing for someone to do.
But even with all these strange connections, there's something about McReynolds that could cross him off the suspect list.
They were surmising at that point that an intruder, if he got in, probably came in through the window. Bill McReynolds, who was 67 years old, is not in the best shape. So I think his ability to participate in such a crime would be limited.
And furthermore, none of the DNA was a match for Bill McReynolds and his wife.
There's no evidence that he came down the chimney and did anything inappropriate.
So Bill McReynolds was ultimately eliminated as a suspect.
Although the police have been investigating many people, at this point, the case isn't really moving.
Now the police are primarily considering John and Patsy as the suspects.
The Boulder Police Department was under pressure to resolve the case. The Boulder community wanted it. The cops certainly wanted the Ramseys charged. When you have a case like this and you're kind of struggling with, which way to go, then it's not unusual for a DA's office to seat a grand jury and have the grand jury look at all the evidence and have the grand jurors make a determination of should there be charges filed or not.
In October 1999, a grand jury convened to decide if John and Patsy were responsible for their daughter's death. And for the next 13 months, the 12 grand jurors heard from dozens of witnesses and reviewed 30,000 pieces of evidence.
The grand jury was significant because it was the first time the public felt the case was moving forward and that something might actually happen.
If these grand jurors are presented with 2/3 of the evidence we've read about in the press, they could well conclude that probable cause exists against one or more of the Ramseys.
John Ramsey told me in 2012 when I was with him that he and Patsy fully expected to be indicted. Patsy was joking. She hoped they gave her vertical stripes instead of horizontal stripes so she would look thinner in jail. And they had signed over the care of Burke to John's brother.
The grand jury heard the evidence that was selected by the Boulder Police and the District Attorney's Office. They looked at the DNA evidence. There was male DNA on the crotch of the child's panties and on a waistband of her leggings. These are two separate garments where the DNA matches. The clear implication is that she was disrobed by a male individual.
Once technology allowed, this DNA was able to be checked, and it was able to be run against the DNA of the Ramsey family. When police finally did this, they found none of the DNA was a match.
The Boulder grand jury has completed its work.
No prosecutor is really eager to go to trial when there is DNA evidence which seemingly exonerates the very person you are seeking to convict.
We do not have sufficient evidence to warrant the filing of charges against anyone who has been investigated.
I remember being outside when the DA came with all of the media and saying that he was not indicting. The Ramseys were as shocked as the rest of the world were that no indictment came out of this.
It was not a victory for the Ramsey family, however. They, on many accounts, had already lost in the court of public opinion.
This angered the police community. They know that DNA doesn't solve every case and that there are a multitude of other things that go into solving a case.
Just because the parents' DNA wasn't found in that particular sample doesn't mean that they can be eliminated completely as potential suspects.
Before I hung my professional opinion on the DNA report, I would want to see how certain that laboratory was, and was there sufficient DNA to develop a full profile. The other thing that I take issue with on that DNA is the only DNA found on the waistband was the unknown DNA. We know that John Ramsey carried her up, holding her around the waist. We know that Patsy Ramsey touched the child. And we suspect that some of the people in that room may also have put hands on the child. Why wasn't their DNA found?
It was a hollow victory for the Ramsey family, however. They, on many accounts, had already lost in the court of public opinion. It was virtually impossible for them to go on with their lives.
The Ramseys moved to Atlanta to escape the spotlight. But nothing would ever end the suspicion that one or both of them were involved in JonBenét's murder. Guilty or not, Patsy Ramsey will never be charged. In 2003, after 9 years in remission, Patsy is again battling ovarian cancer until she dies on June 24th, 2006.
You know, as long as Patsy was alive, she was still feeling that she was under the scrutiny.
While the police had been focused on the parents, another suspect emerges from across the world.
10 years after the murder of this little girl, the district attorney's office focuses on an individual.
John Mark Carr.
John Mark Carr was living in Thailand at the time.
He was in Thailand in large part because of access to sex clubs. He was a known pedophile. He was a person with clear evidence of mental illness, as well as these perversions.
Through email correspondence with someone at the University of Colorado, Carr admitted having been fixated on JonBenet.
Carr claimed to have been there when JonBenet Ramsey was killed, and then ultimately claimed that he had committed the crime.
10 years, thousands of investigative hours, endless speculation, countless suspects, no arrests. In 2006, the JonBenet murder case is stone cold. And then, a man makes a shocking admission.
This is an individual who is a known pedophile who admitted having been involved in her death.
John Mark Carr has been extradited from Thailand to the U.S. and is ready to make a confession.
So they bring John Mark Carr over from Thailand, and he comes into Boulder.
But as soon as detectives sit down with Carr, they realize something is amiss.
The problem with John Mark Carr is that how he says he killed her is not how the crime scene would indicate.
Carr's utter absence of knowledge of any of the details that had been kept back from the public was very telling to investigators.
Carr claims that he drugged JonBenet and then sexually assaulted her. But the autopsy report doesn't find any drugs or alcohol in her system, nor is any semen ever found on her body.
They also do some interviews with his ex-wife. He wasn't even in Boulder at the time that this happened.
Once his DNA was excluded from the crime scene, it is clear that of all the people in the entire universe who could have killed JonBenet Ramsey, John Mark Carr is not one of them.
It was a low watermark in the investigation of the JonBenet homicide.
It looked as if the case had hit its final dead end until 2013, when one local Boulder media outlet decided to dig into the past. The Boulder Daily Camera sues for the grand jury's decision from nearly 15 years earlier to be unsealed, and what they discover is a bombshell that turns this case upside down.
The public was never aware the grand jury issued an indictment. The grand jury came up with 2 charges. The grand jury believed that John Ramsey and Patsy Ramsey should be charged with child abuse or child neglect resulting in death.
The jury believed that the family was involved from the evidence they had heard, but that they were not convinced that they actually murdered the child themselves. They could have proceeded to prosecute the Ramseys for those 2 counts. We could never talk to the grand jurors, but they must have been pretty angry, knowing all these years, my gosh, we did vote to indict.
But at the time of the grand jury's decision, the DA chose not to follow through with their wishes to indict the Ramseys for child neglect resulting in death.
For an indictment, it only has to be probable cause, more probable than not. To prove a criminal case to a jury of 12, it's proof beyond a reasonable doubt. This case so far exceeds any other modern-day criminal case in terms of the theories that have been espoused.
An intruder may have killed
Bill and Janet McReynolds.
John Mark Carr.
New DNA evidence has cleared 2 people.
I did not kill JonBenet.
It's perfect, thinking about it as a game of Clue. Unfortunately, this is not a game. Unfortunately, it's at the expense of a terrible tragedy. We have a dead child, and to this day, we have no one who's been held criminally responsible for it. This young child was robbed of everything that life has to offer.
Nothing short of a confession and corroboration by DNA is ever going to solve the JonBenet Ramsey murder.
One of the saddest things about this case is, amid all the mystery, the real JonBenet is forgotten. This was a girl who had dreams. This was a good little kid.
Una mujer salió del trabajo, se subió a su coche y dejó de contestar los mensajes. Cuando la policía se involucraron, apenas pudieron encontrar ninguna evidencia. Pero el caso rápidamente la situación empezó a complicarse con la aparición de nuevos detalles. Y una vez que los detectives finalmente descubrieron la historia completa, apenas pudieron procesar lo que estaban mirando. Era difícil creer que algo de esto hubiera sucedido. En realidad sucedió en la vida real, pero así lo hizo, y el caso captó rápidamente la atención. Atención a nivel nacional. Kendra Hatcher nació el 3 de febrero, nació en 1980 en Springfield, Illinois. Crecí en una familia numerosa y profundamente religiosa. Y desde que era pequeña, la iglesia fue una parte importante de su vida. En la escuela, Kendra no solo obtuvo las mejores calificaciones. Ella también fue capitán de 2 equipos, voleibol y animadora. Además de eso, ella pasó gran parte de su tiempo libre lo dedica a ayudar a los demás. Ella impartía clases bíblicas para niños en la iglesia y en viajes misioneros en su lugar de pasar las vacaciones de verano con ella amigos. Después de terminar la escuela secundaria, Kendra, que estaba entre las mejores de su clase, fue a una universidad en Indiana donde ella estudió bioquímica en español. Desde allí se mudó a Kentucky y se graduó de la Facultad de Odontología, y se convirtió en un dentista pediátrico. Kendra estaba decidida para ayudar a los niños sin importar cuánto dinero que tenían sus padres. Así que ella niños tratados regularmente en familias de bajos ingresos barrios completamente gratis. También viajó a Ecuador para recibir tratamiento. Niños que no tenían acceso a atención dental en todos. En 2015, Kendra recibió una oferta de trabajo como un dentista pediátrico en una clínica en Dallas. Así que se mudó a Texas y alquiló un apartamento en un complejo de lujo. Ella tenía 35 años en ese momento y ya había construido una carrera exitosa. Pero también quería una familia. Unos meses después, conoció a un hombre de 38 años llamado Ricardo, y las cosas entre ellos despegaron rápidamente. Ricky era un graduado de Harvard. Médico que trabaja como dermatólogo con una sólida carrera propia. Después de tan solo pocas citas, Kendra y Ricky se sintieron como estaban hechos el uno para el otro. Además de cómo ambos se dedicaban a la medicina, compartían los mismos valores, los mismos intereses y los mismos grandes planes para el futuro. Kendra siempre estaba lleno de energía, y Ricky siguieron su ritmo. Pasaron el verano juntos. De 2015 prácticamente inseparables, viajaban juntos siempre que podían. En agosto, ya estaban hablando sobre el matrimonio e incluso había establecido un fondo conjunto para la boda para ahorrar para la ceremonia de sus sueños. Ricky también estaba planeando mudarse a California que otoño, y Kendra iba a ir con él. Durante las siguientes semanas, ellos fueron ocupados preparándose para la mudanza. Al mismo tiempo, planearon un viaje para visitar los padres de Kendra. También reservaron un corto vacaciones en México. Sus vuelos fueron programados para el 3 de septiembre. El día anterior a su viaje, Ricky terminó su turno a poco después de las 4 de la tarde. Sacó la maleta de casa y se dirigió al apartamento de Kendra. Ella todavía estaba en trabajo, y planeó simplemente esperar a que ella allí. Alrededor de las 6, salió para una carrera vespertina, y regresé aproximadamente a las 1:30 después. No había tomado su teléfono consigo, y cuando regresó, vio que Kendra había enviado 2 mensajes de texto. Alrededor de las 6:45, ella había escrito que su turno finalmente había terminado y ella iba de camino a casa. 20 minutos después, ella envió otro mensaje diciendo que decidí pasar por casa de un amigo para pedir prestada una cámara subacuática para el viaje. Luego, 5 minutos después de que Ricky llegara de regreso de su carrera, ella volvió a enviar un mensaje de texto que decía: ella había terminado con todo y estaba directo a casa. Un poco más tarde, él le envió un mensaje de texto diciéndole que se estaba muriendo de hambre y le pregunté qué quería para cenar. Pero ella no respondió. Pensando que simplemente no podía responder mientras conducía, escribió que caminaría hasta un mexicano cercano camión de comida y compra algo para ambos de ellos. De regreso, Ricky notó que el estacionamiento de varios niveles en el complejo de Kendra estaba repleto de policía. Había coches patrulla por todas partes con sus luces encendidas y las entradas y las salidas estaban acordonadas con cinta amarilla. Le envió un mensaje de texto a Kendra al respecto y le dijo que encontrar otro lugar para estacionar su auto, pero de nuevo, no hubo respuesta. Él regresó a su apartamento y esperó un rato. Aunque más tiempo, pero Kendra todavía no lo hacía. Volver a casa. En ese momento, Ricky no en absoluto entró en pánico. Supuso que ella podría recordé algunos recados de última hora. Antes de su viaje y estaba atado. Finalmente, decidió conducir de regreso a su propio lugar para recoger algunas cosas más para el camino. Cuando regresó en el edificio de Kendra, entró ascensor y presionó su piso, pero un oficial de policía de pie dentro inmediatamente lo detuvo y le dijo que no podía subir. Fue entonces cuando de repente Ricky se dio cuenta del largo silencio de Kendra podría estar relacionado con la policía presencia en su complejo. Y un breve tiempo después, los oficiales confirmaron su peor crimen. Miedo. Kendra había sido encontrada muerta en el estacionamiento. Según los oficiales, alguien se acercó a ella justo después de que ella salió de su coche y le disparó. La parte posterior de la cabeza casi en el punto campo de batalla vacío. El asesino le robó el bolso. Y la cámara subacuática que ella acaba de usar lo pidió prestado a su amiga. Al principio, todo apuntaba a un robo. Kendra vivía en un complejo de lujo, y era fácil imaginar a alguien deslizándose en el garaje de varios niveles, con la esperanza de asaltar un residente. Tal vez no lo habían planeado matarla, pero ella gritó o intentó correr. El atacante entró en pánico y tiró el detonante. Pero esa teoría comenzó a desmoronarse casi inmediatamente. Solo se puede acceder al garaje con un código de acceso, que solo tenían los residentes. Y el asesino ni siquiera le quitó el teléfono, aunque estaba a la vista de todos. Detectives, comenzó a verse mucho más como algo personal. Y Ricky estaba la primera persona a la que miraron fijamente en. El hecho de que él hubiera estado en ese apartamento y entraba y salía por los alrededores el momento del asesinato les hizo preguntarse si él estuvo involucrado. Pero la vigilancia de grabaciones y declaraciones de testigos finalmente demostró que no había estado en el garaje cuando ocurrió el tiroteo. También parecía genuinamente sorprendido y devastado lo suficiente como para que los investigadores comenzó a dudar de que tuviera algo que hacer con él. Poco después, los agentes encontraron un testigo. ¿Quién había estado en el garaje en el momento del tiroteo? Uno de los residentes bajó allí en el ascensor con un amigo, y tan pronto como se abrieron las puertas, oyeron un disparo cerca seguido de un grito desgarrador. Los dos hombres entraron en pánico, corrieron hacia su coche y se encerraron adentro. Momentos después, un viejo jeep negro pasaron junto a ellos. Inmediatamente supuse que el conductor tenía algo que hacer con el disparo porque el jeep estaba volando a través del estrecho garaje a gran velocidad. Bajando como si el conductor no me di cuenta de que terminaba en un callejón sin salida más abajo. Unos cuantos segundos después, el jeep volvió a aparecer y giró en la otra dirección, hacia la salida. El residente llamó al 911 y condujo afuera. Al pasar junto al auto de Kendra, él vio el cuerpo de una mujer tirado junto a él en un charco de sangre. Las cámaras de seguridad no cubrieron el lugar exacto donde se produjo el tiroteo sucedió. Pero los detectives rápidamente encontraron el jeep negro en otras cámaras, y ahí fue donde llegó la primera sorpresa. La conductora era claramente una mujer. El detalle hizo que la teoría del robo pareciera aún más plausible. Más débil. Los investigadores intentaron rastrear el jeep a través de sus placas y me registré, pero no llegué a ninguna parte. El único lo que podían afirmar con seguridad era que el vehículo no pertenecía a nadie que vivían en el edificio. Detectives comenzó a hablar con los amigos de Kendra y familia, tratando de averiguar si ella no había tenido ningún conflicto con nadie. Llevo viviendo en Dallas solo unos 6 años. Meses, así que su círculo allí no era muy aún grande, pero ya había hecho algunos amigos íntimos. Todos dijeron lo mismo. Kendra no tenía enemigos, y en su vida no había habido ningún drama. En el trabajo, no fue diferente. Un colega dijo que todos los padres estaban contentos con ella y esa Kendra fue increíble con niños. Sin un sospechoso real en quien centrarse. La policía decidió publicar imágenes del jeep negro a los medios y preguntó si solicita la colaboración del público para identificar al conductor. Al día siguiente, hacia la tarde, los detectives recibí una llamada de un hombre llamado Joe. Me dijo, el vehículo que aparece en las imágenes era definitivamente suyo, pero él no había sido el uno que lo conduce. Según Joe, en el día del asesinato, su amigo de la infancia, una mujer llamada Brenda se había puesto en contacto con él. Era dueño de un taller mecánico, y ella preguntó si podía echarle un vistazo. El coche de una amiga, una mujer llamada Crystal. Brenda y Crystal vinieron a la tienda, dejó el coche y le preguntó a Joe si él podría prestarles algo para conducir mientras él trabajó en ello. Joe les entregó el llaves de su jeep negro y las mujeres se marcharon en coche. Esa misma noche, Joe fue a un café donde él y Brenda habían estado accedió a reunirse para que ella pudiera devolver el jeep. Pero cuando ella apareció, Crystal no estaba con ella, y tampoco lo estaba el coche. Brenda dijo que su amiga se había ido para hacer algunos recados, pero estaría allí pronto. Se sentaron en el café durante bastante tiempo. Mientras, y durante todo el tiempo, Brenda siguió intentando llamar a Crystal, pero ella nunca recogió. Entonces, Brenda dijo que tal vez el teléfono estaba fallando y pidió usar de Joe. Tan pronto como marcó el número de Crystal. Crystal contestó al número de su teléfono. Enseguida dijo que traería el jeep a casa de Joe. Un poco más tarde, se encontraron allí tal como ella lo había prometido. Crystal apareció con su hijo pequeño, devolvió el coche, y ella y Brenda arrancó. Todo parecía normal. Al día siguiente, después de que Joe ya se hubiera detenido al pensar en todo aquello, vio un informe de noticias sobre el asesinato de Kendra y se quedó paralizado cuando se dio cuenta de que la policía estaba buscando su jeep. Desde las cámaras de seguridad e imágenes, era obvio que no era solo el mismo modelo. Era su coche. Joe se acercó a Brenda y le dijo que la había visto su jeep en las noticias en relación con el asesinato, exigiendo una explicación. Al principio, ella intentó convencerlo de que era otro vehículo, pero estoy absolutamente seguro de que era suyo. Fue entonces cuando dijo que Crystal había sido la única conduciendo y afirmó que no tenía ni idea a dónde había ido su amiga o si ella no tuvo nada que ver con lo que pasó. Brenda añadió que Crystal usaba regularmente drogas y ese día probablemente había tomado su jeep para recoger algunos. Ella también dijo que no se ponga en contacto con Crystal o el policía, advirtiendo que solo causaría serios problemas para él. Además de eso, ella le aconsejó que escondiera el jeep, o mejor aún, repíntalo. Joe conocía su coche. Había estado involucrado en un asesinato y estaba conmocionado por toda la situación. Entonces, primero, no fue a la policía. Tenía miedo de poder terminar en problemas legales. Se preocupa. Pero al día siguiente, él tomó una decisión y llamó al 911. Tan pronto como cuando los detectives obtuvieron esa información, llamé a Ricky y le pregunté si conocía a alguno. Conexión entre Kendra, Brenda y Crystal. Para su sorpresa, Ricky dijo, Kendra no conocía a ninguno de los dos, pero él conocía muy bien a Brenda. Ella era su EJ. Y en ese preciso momento, mientras Brenda estaba hablando por teléfono con los detectives. En realidad, ella iba de camino a su casa. Lugar. Él y Brenda se habían conocido hacía 3 años. A principios de 2012. Ella tenía 31 años en ese momento, trabajando como asistente dental y ella misma está estudiando para ser dentista. Después de un tiempo, se fueron a vivir juntos. Y comenzaron a hablar de conseguir casado. Pero con el tiempo, Ricky se sintió menos y menos feliz en la relación. Y en agosto de 2014, 2 años después de conocerse, decidió romper con ella. Brenda, fue un golpe duro. Ella no. Quería dejarlo ir e incluso se tomó un descanso de la escuela porque no podía pensar sobre cualquier cosa excepto su relación. Aún así, se mudó y consiguió un apartamento en un lugar cercano vecindario. Ella también se mantuvo cerca contacto con Ricky y continuó ayúdala ya que su salario apenas cubría el alquiler. A veces él pagaba por ella comestibles y facturas e incluso añadió su línea telefónica a su propio plan. Ricky no tenía intención de volver junto con ella, sin embargo, y fue intentando activamente conocer a alguien nuevo. Simplemente no parecía poder encontrar el adecuado persona. Aproximadamente 2 meses después de tras la ruptura, Ricky decidió apuntarse a un programa de formación. Clase de baile, para su sorpresa, Brenda estaba allí también. Los emparejaron, empezaron a hablar de nuevo y finalmente, Ricky decidió darle un nuevo rumbo a la relación. Una segunda oportunidad. Pero 6 meses después, él terminó justo donde había estado antes. Él sentía que simplemente no eran una buena pareja. Y esta vez, la ruptura fue definitivo. Igual que la primera vez, Brenda lo tomó muy mal. Pero Ricky no tenía nada que decir. Intención de volver a estar juntos y trató de mantener el contacto al mínimo. Eso resultó ser más fácil decirlo que hacerlo. Él seguía encontrándose con ella por todas partes. Ciudad. Al principio, lo ignoró. Ella vivía no muy lejos de él, así que no parece extraño, pero después de un tiempo, comenzó a sentirse mal. A donde quiera que iba, Brenda también parecía estar allí, de alguna manera. Más tarde, Ricky conoció a Kendra y a Brenda. Para él pasó a un segundo plano. Ella, sin embargo, seguía en su plan telefónico y él le enviaba mensajes de texto de vez en cuando, preguntándole. Cambiara su propio plan porque él estaba todavía lo estoy pagando. Cada vez, Brenda lo convenció de esperar un poco más. Finalmente, decidió cortarlo. Él mismo y le envió un mensaje diciéndole que va a cerrar su línea a principios de año septiembre. Justo cuando él y Kendra estaba planeando su viaje a México. Ahora que la policía le había dicho a Ricky Brenda podría haber estado involucrada en el asesinato, estaba en pánico. Después la muerte de Kendra, les dijo a todos sus amigos. Y la gente cercana a él lo que había sucedido, incluyendo a Brenda. Ella respondió solo al día siguiente, se lo ofreció. Condolencias, y preguntó cómo podía ayuda. Incluso prometió traerlo. Comestibles, y en el momento exacto los detectives lo llamaron, Ricky estaba en casa. Esperando a que ella aparezca. Oficiales localizaron rápidamente a Brenda en una biblioteca. Donde ella estaba estudiando para un examen y la trajeron a la estación para cuestionamiento. Al mismo tiempo, los detectives también localizaron a Crystal y la interrogó por separado. Brenda respondió a todo con sumo cuidado, como si tuviera miedo de dar siquiera un poca información más de la necesaria. Dijo que pasó varias horas en la biblioteca el día antes de estudiar para exámenes de la Facultad de Odontología y luego estuvo en el café. Durante aproximadamente 1 hora. Incluso se detuvo. Saquen el recibo para probarlo. Detective se dio cuenta de que había estado en el café justo durante el periodo en que Kendra estaba asesinado. Lo que significaba que Brenda tenía una coartada sólida. Aún así, no se lo creían. Su historia es completamente diferente por varias razones. Brenda no podía recordar el todo cronograma de su día, a qué hora había despertó, cómo había llegado hasta allí biblioteca o de vuelta a casa. O lo que ella había hecho con el resto de su tiempo. Pero el café recibo, el que cubría exactamente en el momento del asesinato, ella produjo al instante. Estaba justo encima. Dentro de su billetera en casi perfecta condición. Los detectives tuvieron la sensación ella lo había estado preparando, sabiendo que puede que tenga que enseñárselo a la policía. Y eso no fue todo. Cuando la revisaron. La coartada se mantuvo. Ella realmente había sido en el café. Y físicamente, ella no pudo haber sido el quien disparó Kendra. Pero ahora que tanto Brenda como Crystal estaba en la estación, detectives volvió a examinar la seguridad. Memoricé algo y me di cuenta de algo. Importante. La mujer al volante del jeep se parecía mucho más a Crystal que Brenda. Mientras que un grupo de los detectives estaban hablando con Brenda, sus colegas estaban interrogando a Crystal. Y esa entrevista fue mucho más allá. En primero, Crystal insistió en que no lo sabía. Nada y no tenía nada que ver con qué sucedió. Pero una vez que le mostraron imágenes de vigilancia, ella cambió su historia y admitió que ella era la única conduciendo el jeep. Solo ella dijo cosas no había sucedido como la policía pensó. Según ella era simplemente paseando por la ciudad con su hijo pequeño. Cuando un hombre con una pistola saltó repentinamente la metió en el coche y le dijo que hiciera exactamente lo que él dijo. Supuestamente le ordenó. Para entrar en el estacionamiento de un edificio de apartamentos, salí del coche y desapareció de la vista. Unos segundos más tarde, Crystal dijo que escuchó un disparo. Entonces el hombre regresó, entró y dijo para que se fuera en coche. Los detectives sabían esto. No se ajustaba en absoluto a la realidad. En primer lugar, las imágenes de vigilancia claramente demostró que no había ningún niño en el coche. En segundo lugar, hicieron la pregunta obvia. Si este hombre salió y desapareció, ¿por qué? ¿Te quedaste sentado esperando? ¿De marcharse en coche? Después de eso, Crystal cambió su historia de nuevo. Esta vez ella dijo que en realidad había habido un hombre con su nombre Lamar y que Brenda había pagado le dio $500 para robarle a Kendra y secuestrarla. Documentos para que no pudiera volar a México con Ricky. pero para algunos por esa razón, decidió matarla. Justo después, Crystal fue arrestada. Pero la situación de Brenda era más complicada.